Hey, we're live. Welcome. I
Hey,
know, right?
awesome.
Welcome to another coaching conversation. I am here with my dear friend and colleague Ryan McCauley. And Ryan, why don't we just jump right in? Why don't you tell us a little bit about you so that we've got some context?
Great. Thank you. Thanks for hosting, Todd. I'm Ryan McCauley, pronoun she, her. I have a background in education, started off as a middle school teacher, then moved to more academic advising in an education technology company, and then into coaching. So that's kind of my background, although I also am an athlete. I compete internationally for ice climbing. So I like to bring that into my coaching as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. I loved learning about that. So, Ryan, you and I met in the certification process for one of the coaching certifications that we both hold, and and that's where our relationship sort of was created and solidified, which I love. It's one of the things that I love about this community is that there's so much. Um, I've made a lot of friends, and it's like it's the first job that I've ever had where it's like I really like all my coworkers. I know, right?
That pros and cons to that, I guess. But yes, I think we were blessed with a really amazing cohort, and I'm very grateful to
Yeah,
stay in touch
I
with all these
agree.
people.
I agree. All right, so I'm going to put our names up on the screen, and maybe we should talk about. Well, actually, I'll put this back for a second. Maybe we should talk about our topic real fast because um, we're here to discuss the gift of being dangerously underprepared, and I get a kick out of the idea of being dangerously underprepared. Um, and maybe we should just riff on what we mean by dangerously underprepared, because it kind of it
Yeah,
what is it well before we started talking, before we started filming, you said, oh, there's that feeling that comes up when you think of being dangerously unprepared, and
oh,
what's that?
yeah. I mean, even just reading that title, if I'm being honest with myself, like there's a lot of constriction in my body. I'm like, ooh, dangerous. Like, is that really the wording you want to use? Like, no one's going to want to come to that. And I mean, as an ice climber, like, I don't want to go into something claiming it to be dangerously underprepared. Like for me, risk management, I take very seriously. So
Right.
I think it came out of our conversation previously when we were talking about what we wanted to bring into this conversation and into this space.
Mhm.
And you kind of used that as a terminology, if I remember correctly, for kind of how you had started to approach things so that you weren't just wildly overthinking and over preparing. And to me, it kind of sounded like a more playful way to look at it because I think this topic has held a lot of constriction for me. It's been like, how do I control this? How do I engineer the uncertainty out of something? How do I make sure that I show up perfectly? How do I make sure that like everyone has the information they need? And you can tell even my voice is going faster. Like my anxiety goes up. And so I was like, I don't want it to be like a heavy topic. I want it to have kind of an element of playfulness to it. But yeah, what would you add, Todd?
Yeah, it's for me. It's something. It's a phrase that I've had in my repertoire for a long time, and it's born of comparison. Um, and it started a long time ago when people would accuse me of overthinking something, and I was constantly being accused, or I was constantly accused of overthinking things, and my knee-jerk response almost 100% of the time was, I'm not overthinking this, you're underthinking it. And if you want to traipse into this thing being dangerously underprepared, well, that's on you, but I'm not going to. so so that's where it all started for me, and I think, like, I love that you brought up anxiety, because I think that there's a connection between. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, obviously, but there's a connection between that over preparation and feeling anxious. And you brought up something also that I think is really also very important, and um, you mentioned within the context of ice climbing and risk assessment. And I think, it's important to create that distinction here. We're not talking about situations that benefit from a reasonable and accurate and appropriate amount of preparation in situations that could be very dangerous, like actually dangerous if you don't, like if you fall off of an ice cliff, wall, whatever, I don't know. I'm not sure what the right word is. You know, if you fall from the thing that you're doing, like that could be very, very dangerous and you can hurt yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's not the situation that I'm thinking about. But you know, we go into lots and lots of situations where we want to prepare because that's what's going to make us feel comfortable. And I don't know what your experience has been, but mine has been, it doesn't matter how prepared I am in those situations. I just never hit enough preparation to be comfortable.
I appreciate that distinction. And I also will say that even in situations that do require higher levels of risk management, I think I have still related to them in a way that's like, I must plan for everything. Like, what if this happens? How do I know about this? And after a certain point, there is a line where you can like actually trust that you've done enough, that you are safe. And often in the past, even in those situations, I didn't know where that line was. There was no line for me. It just was like, no, you will plan until the point of exhaustion or until you are literally out of time. And I think that there's still growth that can be had there and be safe at the same time.
Yeah. Our friend Antonio is with us today, and he's resonating with the preparation. So we're going to bring the comment up online. So Antonio, thanks. You know, the origin story of the dangerously underprepared phrase and the distinction between what it is and what it isn't. So it sounds like there's something that's true in this for a number of us. And hi, Antonio. Antonio is part of the same cohort that Ryan and I were from. We met at the same time. So that's fantastic. Yeah, finding the line is a really, I love that, and I hadn't even considered that possibility. In you know, how much is enough, and what comes up for me when you say that is there's that line of preparation, which once I cross it, I've crossed into self-trust. Mm-hmm. And I think what's really interesting, and maybe this is where there is a particular and specific gift of being dangerously underprepared for chronic over-preparers, in that I believe that we've left that line in our past a long time ago. Like, there's been so much preparation for so much stuff, and we bring all of that with us, that there's an opportunity to sort of see what happens when we just trust ourselves in a moment. And I'm going to declare something for everyone who's listening too, right? This is a live conversation. Ryan and I talked a little bit about what we were going to talk about, but we didn't do very much prep. We were talking about, you know, what's going to happen for the holiday weekend before we went online. So so I mean, are we dangerously underprepared?
Well, to your point about like leaving that line in the past, like long ago, I think that I would go further and say we've given that line to other people. We have let other people define what is enough by comparison, by looking for validation externally. And I think then if we've done that, it's likely served us in different parts of our lives. It's likely protected us. And what we practice is what gets strengthened. So the more we do that, the harder it can be to move away from that. And so I think, like you talked about anxiety coming into play here versus trust. And I think I heard this phrase once, and I'm probably going to say it a little bit wrong, you know, underprepared here, about like the opposite of anxiety is not certainty, it's self-trust. And I don't think I got that for so long. I was like, I feel anxious about this presentation. I feel anxious about this team meeting. And as a result, what will make me feel less anxious is like having a really intense bullet line or list of bullets of exactly what I'm going to say, and having all the answers, and having brainstormed any of the questions that might come up. And like, that's exhausting. And then a question would come up that I hadn't planned for, and it was like really upsetting.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing that's so that's so much. Listen, I'm going to tell a quick story, because oh, I had there's so much good information that came from coaching, and I think Ryan, that I have a real strong affinity for the Four Agreements, by Don Miguel Ruiz, right? And one of them is don't make assumptions, and part of don't make assumptions is, draw on your own authority to ask questions, to ask clarifying questions about what's important to you. And if you're a chronic overpreparer and you're not shy, you can take that to a really dangerous extreme. So I was in a workshop not that long ago, and it was a long, like a week-long workshop. And in the first day, I think I asked 100 clarifying questions because I wasn't sure. I didn't understand this, and I wanted to be certain about that, and blah blah blah. And at the beginning of the second day, one of the leaders of the workshop looked at me and said, "Todd, I have spent more time clarifying things for you than I have for all of the other participants here combined. What do you make of that?" And it was a shocking hold up the mirror moment of oh, what am I doing, and what do I really need in order to be successful in this moment? And what if I actually have it even though I don't know the answers? And that was like an aha moment, and speaks very much to what you're talking about, right? It's not necessarily about, do I have all the answers? It's, can I surf the wave when it comes? And that's different. Because we're not going to know all the answers. We're just not going to know all the answers. It's not possible. Right? And I know I spent my life trying.
I think about a coach that I've worked with for a while. When we first started working together, I would come to her and say, so this situation came up and I've got to solve it. And here's what I'm thinking. And like, I thought about the pros and cons here. And here's what I'm thinking makes sense. And she was like, why do you need to do this right now? You'll get more information. And I was like, no, but like I have a lot of information and I want to be ready. And like someone's going to ask and I've got to be ready to respond and look confident. And she was like, no, like you'll get more information. I would get so annoyed and be like, you just don't get it. And then, shocker, a few days would go by, something would happen and all of my pro cons list would be outdated. And I slowly started to realize like, oh, I'm not actually like, I'm actually creating a lot of resistance to this. I'm not like embracing this. I'm not like being with what's here. I'm not present to this. I'm trying to force an outcome that isn't going to happen. And I am setting myself up for like double the suffering, because it's not just then trying to process if something doesn't go the way I want. It's like, I'm now having all these like internal thoughts that are causing resistance and suffering and frustration. And then something still doesn't go the way I want. And I've used up a lot of time that then wasn't actually as valuable as I wanted.
Yeah.
So,
and we end up being more rigid as a result. And I think that's the thing that's really interesting, because then, if something goes off script, oh no. And now, that thing that I wanted to avoid, that looking unprepared, that seeming like a deer in headlights, becomes more likely rather than less likely. And that's what I think is really, really interesting. So what are some things that you do to sort of, and I said this beforehand, but it's like, I don't want to use words like combat or overcome or but like, what are some things that you do to ease the tendency? Because, you mentioned consistent application being important. So I wonder if you have, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, but our topic is being dangerously underprepared.
Yeah, so here we go.
It's, I wonder, like, do you have any practices? Do you have any tips, any advice? Like, what kinds of things help you to be okay with less preparation than what we're both accustomed to?
I mean, I think there are a couple things that come to mind. Like I was saying before, what we practice is what gets strengthened. And I think you had also alluded to like, there's something deeper than like wanting to be prepared. Like, what am I really trying to get at? And so I started kind of looking at like how I relate to things like failure and mistakes and comparison. And I think especially with mistakes, like even when I would plan things like to a T, I can still make mistakes. And I think really trying to be compassionate with myself about that and practicing that compassion, even in the moment when it's so easy to focus on, oh my gosh, I could have said it this way. I could have done it this way. Like when you're asking me now, like this answer isn't going to be perfect, and that's fine. There's still value in that. So I think like really thinking about how I'm relating to things like mistakes and like what is that fear that's really driving me to do that planning, so I can really start to look at that more and being compassionate with myself. Like there's a reason I was conditioned this way. It served me. That's okay. And
Yes.
like I can start chipping away at it, and I'm not going to get it perfectly, and that's okay. And then the other thing is, so much of what was coming up for me when I was really struggling with this is like I was only focusing on what I was doing, the action, like go, 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 do more, do more, do more. Like that was what I saw as successful. And I never considered like, how am I being? How am I showing up? Who am I? And I think like there was one point when my coach pointed this out to me, and I think I even was like, being doesn't pay the bills. And then we started to reflect on it, and I was like, oh wait, shoot, actually it kind of can, because if I'm showing up a like frantic mess, people have enough of that going on in their lives, or that like people that they associate, like that doesn't magnetize people to you. No one want needs more of that. Like I don't need more. That doesn't serve me. And then when something unexpected happens, if I'm just like frantic, like, oh my God, like, and I haven't created space for myself internally or externally, like I'm much less equipped to deal with that. I know that from experience. Like panic, deer in the headlights, like I'm not creative. I shut all of that down. So I think about like, what is my intention for this meeting, this call? And so often it's like connecting to people around me. So often it's like being present to what comes up. So often it's like, I don't know, finding a solution to a challenge. And I knew all of that before, but I was like, and I'm going to do more to be that person. And then I wasn't that person, but like the actions, like I wasn't showing up the way I wanted to. And so I think also just being really clear about my intentions for that. And like, what is really the most important thing here?
Yeah. You know, Izzy asked a really cool question in the chat, and I think it's related to what you've been talking about. So, Izzy's question is, where does intuition fit into the calculus of feeling the need to over prepare? And I'd love to hear your answer. I'm going to answer it first, but
Please,
for me,
yes.
I think where it fits for me is it's about self-trust again. Once I can trust the intuition that I show up with and not be attached to it, because it doesn't have to be right, then I can create something from that space. And maybe it's right and maybe it's wrong. And it doesn't matter, because whatever it is going to be just new information and new data. I don't know if that answers the question. But where intuition fits for me is it's primarily related to self-trust. When I can trust myself, I can trust my intuition. And when I can trust my intuition, then I don't need to over-prepare in the same way. But what's true for you?
Like, I would add too that when I can slow down, like especially internally, like when I can pause and take a deep breath, when I can slow down my thoughts, I am more in tune with what my intuition is telling me versus what I am perceiving I should be doing, or what my conditioning, like my kind of like knee-jerk reactions are. Because when I'm moving quickly, I sometimes have a tendency to be like, oh yeah, my gut says this. And then if I slow down, I'm like, oh, actually, I just like really wanted to be a people pleaser in that moment. Oopsies. So I think like slowing down also doesn't have to take like an hour or something. I don't have to go do like a 45-minute meditation. If I have even like a minute and a half, I used to be like, oop, I can respond to that Slack message in a minute and a half. Like, watch me go. And now I'm like, great. What's a song that I can listen to half of, that's gonna like put me in a different like energy space? What can I do? Like just even closing my eyes and breathing, like that Slack can wait. And I was probably going to respond to it in a way that sent frantic energy out in the universe anyway. So like you can do a lot with even like a minute before a meeting. Like what do you need to do to slow yourself down and like shift the kind of headspace or energy that you're in? Because that is going to get you more in tune, I think, with like deep down what really does feel resonant with you.
Yeah, it's yes. And I think that self-regulating is an essential ingredient. I love what you're saying. And it's a practice that I never would have taken advantage of in the past either. I think we've got another question. Let me take a look. So Tanya says, here, I'll bring this up on the screen because then I can read it a little better. We can't see each other now, but learned firsthand that trying to prepare for every little thing is futile. However, my perfectionism, and this is a word that we both use a lot, drives me to overcompensate by learning as much as possible beforehand, which causes more time. So have we had that issue? How much knowledge is enough so one doesn't look foolish or unprepared or underprepared? And I think these are great questions. My challenge in that space is maybe it's not always a terrible thing to look a little foolish and underprepared. In my experience, that's way more important to me than it is to anyone else. So what comes up for me when I think of that question is a thing that I sometimes say to my clients, and I know I definitely say to some of my friends, and it's the only person, you are only the center of your own universe. You are not the center of anyone else's, no matter how much you might like to believe you are. So only I am paying attention as closely as I am to the things that I do and say, even if I become wildly famous, which I don't think I ever will. And only you are paying really close and detailed attention to the things that you do and say. But everyone else is too busy paying attention to themselves. So what if we give ourselves permission to look foolish every now and then? What if we give ourselves permission to make a mistake and see what happens? What are the parameters that allow for experimentation? And I think that speaks to that perfectionism element as well. And I understand that message is difficult. It's easy to say, it's hard to practice.
Yeah.
What comes up for you?
I would echo that. And gosh, Tanya, no, you are not alone. That resonates a lot. Yes, I've definitely been there. And honestly, like it's still something that, I take a few steps forward and then I take a few steps back, depending on like what kind of situation it is. And I think even that has been really valuable for me to be like, I like kind of fell back into some past conditioning habits there. Like what was going on? Did I not take care of myself this week? And so I didn't get as much sleep. And so that made it like, so that I felt more anxiety, and that made me like fall into other patterns where it was like tied together that, oh, this is how this works. I do more. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. Like what is coming up internally that's also creating that? Or is it a certain kind of person I'm meeting with? Like, is there some kind of way I'm relating to them? Or I'm telling stories about, ooh, they're a CEO, their X title, like that means something about them. It means something about me. Like, so getting curious about, are there times you notice this coming up more? What might be going on in those settings? Like, is there something that's like triggering, or that other stories that are coming up that are tied to this? Because I think that can help start to unpack like what is bringing that up. And then also, I think I've tried to like kind of question for myself beyond the knowledge, like what else for you is important to bring into this space? Like how do you want to show up? How do you want to relate to the people there? Like what does your version of success look like right now in a way that's like healthy and realistic and supportive, so that you feel like you have showed up in a way that you're proud of, even if like they ask some questions you don't know the answers to, or maybe you do make some mistakes or you look foolish. Like those things can be true, and it doesn't mean you're not enough.
Yes. Those things can be true, and it doesn't mean you're not enough. And it's such a fundamental truth. And for me anyway, it took a really long time to believe.
I mean, yeah, and that's really easy for me to say. Like that takes a lot of practice. And I still have moments where I'm like, ugh, like I didn't do enough on this. And I have to like really sit with that and think about like, okay, what's going on? Why do I feel that way? Like, are there things that I can learn from this? And like, how can I also be compassionate with myself? Like, I think I am reading this book, Authentic Success by Robert Holden. And there was a chapter I was reading recently about like mistakes and failure. And it was talking about how like, with mistakes, like what can you learn from that? And like, how can you be compassionate with yourself? Like that is such a key thing for me. Judgment does not serve me, even if it would have been like, even if it's something I've used in the past to push me or motivate me. I find that I'm a lot more productive and able to move forward when I can also show myself grace.
Well, and I think that's a really important point, because lots and lots and lots of us have been really, really successful in our careers by beating ourselves up. Like, and you can achieve wild success that way, but it's miserable.
And it's usually less sustainable.
Yep.
Has been my experience.
Well, it's why I flamed out of the career that I was in. So, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, and so I love that. I think that's a really, really important point. Is that it's, you can make a mistake, and that doesn't mean anything about your worth. It just means you made a mistake. So fix it and do better next time. And that's okay. And it's okay. Like, it really is okay.
Todd, I'm curious for you, like, what has your journey looked like to be thinking about leaning into dangerously
Yeah.
underprepared approaches?
Yeah, thank you. I think the thing for me is, my buzzword in almost all things is curiosity. And the way that I've overcome or been interested in the things that show up, and we can call them saboteurs, we can call them whatever, right, has been, what's this and why is it here? And the why is it here is almost 100% of the time about keeping me safe. And when I can think, oh, this inclination of mine is about keeping me safe, well, then I have the opportunity to know, well, that's a part of me that I can love. I know that sounds kind of like woo-woo, but if it's a part of me that I can love, then it's a part of me that I can be curious about rather than judge. It's okay. It's okay that this thing is here. It's okay when Mr. Anxiety shows up because he's trying to keep me safe. So what's going on? And are we safe? Let's ask that question first. And then from that space, like when I'm curious, I can start being more compassionate, because then it's easy. But for me, the key is curiosity. It always is. It starts with me and then extends into other people. We're almost at time. I can't believe it's been half an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
Do you have any final words that you want to leave on this topic?
I think I want to really echo what you said about curiosity. I think the times that I have even felt like emotions that feel frustrating or uncomfortable, especially when I have a packed day, like if I feel anxious, I've tended to want to push it away and be like, oh, get out of here. Like I will feel better when I don't feel anxious. And I've seen preparing as a way to combat that, to push it away. Sorry, I used that word. And the times that I've been able to be like, my body is trying to tell me something. There is something valuable. Like there is information behind this. It dissipates in a different way. It helps me actually move forward in a better way. So I think that curiosity can be so powerful.
Yeah. Emotions are energy in motion, right? It's all good. Ryan, thank you so much for today and for spending this time with me. And thank you to everyone who showed up. Thank you so much for the comments. I really love.
Oh my gosh, such great questions.
Exactly. Ryan, if our friends want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
My LinkedIn is great. Messaging me directly through that
Mhm.
is probably the easiest. Yeah.
Fantastic.
What
Okay.
about you?
And I'm Todd. I'm through LinkedIn, or you can find me on my website. I'm www.toddkarges.com. And this has been a really good conversation. And I don't think that I could have had this conversation with anyone else. I really
Thank
appreciate you,
you.
Ryan. Thank you.
I appreciate you too. And I appreciate everyone that showed up today. Thank you.
Indeed. Okay. So until next time, bye.
Bye.